Before I tell you who I became, I need to tell you who I was. Come closer, my sweethearts. All of you. Sit wherever you're comfortable. Tonight isn't just another family gathering. Tonight, I'm finally going to tell you the story I've carried inside my heart. For more than 70 years, my name is Eleanor Brooks. I'm 70 years old. To you, I'm Grandma. The woman who always remembers your birthdays. The one who bakes apple pies every Thanksgiving. The one who tells you not to skip breakfast. That's the version of me you've always known. But before I became your grandmother, before I became your mother's mother, before I had this gray hair and these wrinkled hands, I was just a little girl with empty pockets, big dreams, and a heart that refused to give up. This isn't just one story. It's the story of my entire life. A story I'll tell you one chapter at a time. Some chapters will make you smile. Some may bring tears to your eyes. And some, even after all these years, still hurt when I remember them. If you stay with me until the end, you'll understand why our family is the way it is today. You'll finally know where our strength came from. Because every scar has a story, and every story leaves behind a lesson. So, let's begin where every life begins. Childhood. I was born in a tiny farming town in Kansas. Back then, the roads weren't paved. Neighbors knew one another by name, and nobody locked their front doors. We didn't have much. Our little wooden house had only 2 bedrooms. When winter came, cold air slipped through the cracks in the walls. Sometimes we'd wake up and find frost inside the windows. But to me, it still felt like home, because my father was there, my mother was there, and every evening we ate dinner together around a small wooden table. Looking back now, those simple evenings became the richest memories of my life. My father was a carpenter, not the kind who built fancy homes. He repaired barns, fixed broken fences, made kitchen tables for families who couldn't afford expensive furniture. His hands were always rough, always covered with tiny cuts. But every time he came home, he smiled as if he'd had the easiest day in the world. One evening I asked him, "Dad, why do you smile even when you're so tired?" He laughed softly, "Because, Ellie, a tired body is easier to carry than a guilty heart." I didn't fully understand those words then, but I never forgot them. My mother worked harder than anyone I've ever known. She woke before sunrise, cooked breakfast, packed father's lunch, worked in the vegetable garden, sewed clothes for neighbors to earn extra money, then somehow still found enough energy to sing me to sleep every night. When I think of strength, I don't think of muscles. I think of my mother. Life wasn't perfect. Far from it. There were weeks when meat never appeared on our dinner table. Sometimes dinner was nothing more than bread, potatoes, and hope. But my parents never complained. Instead, they made us believe we already had enough. Only after I became an adult did I realize how much they had sacrificed to protect my childhood. One summer afternoon, everything changed. I was only 8 years old. Father came home much earlier than usual. He wasn't smiling. His shirt was covered in dust, and he walked slower than I'd ever seen before. Mother rushed toward him. "James, what happened?" He sat down quietly, then placed a folded envelope on the kitchen table. Neither of them spoke. I remember the silence more clearly than the words. As a little girl, I didn't know what unpaid bills looked like. I didn't understand debt. I didn't understand fear. But somehow, I understood that envelope, because after it arrived, nothing in our house ever felt the same again. That night, I pretended to be asleep. Instead, I listened from the hallway as my parents whispered to one another, and what I heard changed the rest of my life forever that night. I wasn't asleep, at least, not the way my parents believed. I pulled my little blanket around my shoulders and quietly slipped out of bed. The hallway outside my bedroom was dark. Only the faint light from the kitchen reached the old wooden floor. I sat on the 3rd step of the staircase, holding my favorite stuffed rabbit against my chest. I knew I shouldn't be listening. But something inside me, something I couldn't explain, told me our lives were about to change. My father sat at the kitchen table with his head lowered. The unopened envelope was still lying in front of him. Mother slowly poured 2 cups of coffee. Neither of them touched it. Finally, Father spoke. "I lost the Wilson contract today." Mother closed her eyes. That contract had been his biggest source of work. Without it, half of our income was gone. We'll find another way, Mother whispered. Father shook his head. It isn't just the contract. He slowly opened the envelope. The bank is demanding payment. If we can't catch up within 60 days, they'll take the house. Even though I was only 8, I understood those last words. Take the house. The place where I had learned to walk. The porch where Father taught me how to whistle. The apple tree Mother planted the year I was born. Could strangers really take all of that away? I wrapped my arms tighter around my stuffed rabbit. For the first time in my life, home didn't feel permanent. Mother reached across the table and held Father's hand. We've survived hard times before. We'll survive this too. Father gave her a tired smile. I don't know how. I've already borrowed everything I could. I won't borrow from family again. They have their own children to feed. The silence that followed felt heavier than words. Then Father whispered something that I have never forgotten. I've failed both of you. Those words broke something inside me. Because to me, my father wasn't a failure. He was the strongest man in the world. The man who fixed broken fences, built rocking chairs, carried me on his shoulders during county fairs. How could someone like him believe he had failed? That was the first time I realized, even the strongest people cry. They just try not to let their children see it. The next morning, everything looked normal. Father smiled. Mother made pancakes. They laughed together as if nothing had happened. But now, I could see through the smiles. Children notice much more than adults think. I noticed Mother quietly eating less food. I noticed Father pretending he wasn't hungry. I noticed the worry hidden behind every laugh. And from that day on, I stopped being just a little girl after breakfast. I walked outside with a small glass jar. It had once held strawberry jam. Now, it became my treasure box. Every penny I found, every nickel someone gave me, every coin I earned helping neighbors, went into that jar. I had no idea how much money we needed. I only knew one thing. I wanted to help. A few days later, Mrs. Jenkins, our elderly neighbor, saw me pulling weeds from her flower garden. Eleanor, what are you doing out here? I wanted to help. She smiled kindly. I didn't ask anyone. I know. I just thought your flowers deserved to be beautiful. She laughed. When I finished, she handed me 25 cents. It was the first money I had ever earned. I stared at those coins as if they were gold. That evening, I carefully dropped them into the glass jar. The sound echoed through my bedroom. It was tiny, almost meaningless. But to me, it sounded like hope. Over the next few weeks, I mowed lawns, collected eggs from neighbors' chickens, delivered fresh bread from Mrs. Carter's bakery, swept porches, watered gardens. Most people paid me only a few coins. Some paid me with homemade cookies. Others simply thanked me. I accepted everything with a smile, because every small act reminded me, people are kinder than the world often seems. One evening, Father walked into my room. He noticed the heavy glass jar sitting beside my bed. Eleanor, what's all this? I hesitated. Then I carried the jar to him with both hands. I've been saving. He smiled. For a new doll. I shook my head. For the house. His smile disappeared. He looked at the jar, then back at me. You hurt us that night. It wasn't a question, I slowly nodded. I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to listen. I don't want strangers to take our home. Father sat on the edge of my bed. He pulled me into the biggest hug. His shoulders were shaking. I had never seen him cry before. You should never have to worry about things like this, I whispered. But we're a family. If you're carrying something heavy, can't I carry a little piece too? He couldn't answer. Instead, he held me even tighter. Years later, I realized that wasn't sadness. It was the painful pride of a father who had just discovered his little girl had grown up too soon. The next morning, the glass jar was gone. For one terrible moment, I thought someone had stolen it. Then I walked into the kitchen. The jar was sitting on the table, still full. Beside it was a handwritten note from Father. Never lose this heart, Ellie. One day it will be worth far more than money. I promise. We'll save this house together. I folded that note carefully. I kept it with me for decades, through every move, every hardship, every chapter of my life. because it reminded me that courage isn't measured by how much you have, it's measured by how much you're willing to give. But neither my father nor I had any idea that only a few months later, a single knock on our front door would change our family forever. The older I get, the more I realize that life rarely changes with a loud explosion. Sometimes, it changes with a single knock on the front door. That knock came on a cold October afternoon. I was only 8 years old. Mother was hanging freshly washed clothes on the line. Father was repairing one of our old kitchen chairs. I was sitting beneath the apple tree trying to finish my school homework. Everything felt peaceful. For just a little while, it almost felt like our worries had disappeared. Then, knock, knock, knock. 3 slow, heavy knocks echoed through our little house. Father stood up. He wiped the sawdust from his hands and walked to the front door the moment he opened it. I saw something change in his face. His smile disappeared. 2 men stood outside. One wore a dark gray suit. The other carried a leather briefcase. Neither of them smiled. Father invited them inside. Mother quietly stopped hanging clothes and followed them into the kitchen. I wasn't supposed to listen, but by then, I had already learned that grown-ups often whispered about the things children deserve to know the most. So I quietly sat on the staircase again, holding my stuffed rabbit, listening. The man in the gray suit opened the briefcase. He placed several papers on our kitchen table. "Mr. Brooks, I'm afraid your final payment deadline has expired." Father looked down. "I asked for more time, we understand, but the bank has made its decision." Mother reached for Father's hand beneath the table. The man continued. "If the balance isn't paid within 30 days, the property will be repossessed." That word, repossessed. I didn't know exactly what it meant, but I knew it sounded like goodbye. After the men left, no one spoke. Mother quietly folded the papers. Father stared out the kitchen window for what felt like forever. Then, he did something I had never seen before. He removed his old wedding ring. Mother looked at him. "What are you doing?" He smiled sadly. "If selling this buys us another week, it's worth it." Mother immediately shook her head. "No, we'll face this together." Father gently closed her hand around the ring. "No house is worth losing what this ring means." Even now, 70 years later, I still remember those words, because that was the day I learned love isn't measured by what people own, it's measured by what they refuse to sacrifice. That evening, Mother made vegetable soup. There wasn't much to eat, but somehow, she managed to make everyone else's bowl look fuller than her own. I noticed. Father noticed too. Without saying a word, he quietly poured half of his soup into Mother's bowl. She smiled, then secretly poured some back while he wasn't looking. I watched them both, trying to protect each other. That was love. Not expensive gifts. Not fancy houses, just 2 people, doing everything they could so the other wouldn't go hungry. A week later, something unexpected happened. My teacher, Mrs. Anderson, stopped me after class. "Eleanor, I've noticed you've been falling asleep during lessons." I looked down. "I'm sorry." She smiled gently. "Is everything all right at home?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to protect my parents. But the tears came before the words did. Mrs. Anderson didn't ask another question. She simply hugged me. Sometimes, kindness doesn't need an explanation. The next Saturday, the entire town seemed unusually busy. Neighbors were walking toward our house carrying baskets. Mr. Jenkins brought fresh bread. Mrs. Carter carried vegetables from her garden. The Miller family arrived with blankets. Even children my age brought jars filled with loose coins. I couldn't understand what was happening. Then I saw Mrs. Anderson. She walked over to Father and handed him a small envelope. "Our town takes care of its own," she said. Father opened the envelope. Inside were dozens of small donations. No one had given much. But together, it became more money than my parents had ever imagined. Father looked around at everyone standing in our yard. His voice trembled. "I don't know how to thank you." Mrs. Carter smiled. "You already have. You've spent your whole life helping everyone else. Now let us help you." That afternoon, I learned something I'll never forget. One person may not be able to carry a heavy burden alone, but an entire community can lift almost anything. For the first time in months, I saw my parents laugh. Not because all of our problems were gone, but because hope had returned. I wish I could tell you that everything became perfect after that day. I wish I could tell you we lived happily ever after, but life doesn't work that way. Sometimes, just when you think you've survived the hardest storm, another one begins. Because only a few months later, my father walked through our front door one winter evening, holding his chest. His face had turned pale. He looked at Mother, tried to smile, and collapsed onto the kitchen floor. I can still hear Mother's scream. I can still remember dropping my school books and running toward him. That night, my childhood ended forever. But that, my sweethearts, is a story for our next chapter. If you want to know what happened after the night my father collapsed, Join me in episode 2, I promise you. The hardest part of my journey was only beginning.